This might be the most talented and the deepest defense Notre Dame has had in years. But here's the real question. Who's actually going to start? Let's predict the first team unit heading into spring practice coming up next.
You are Locked On Irish, your daily podcast on the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, and welcome in to Locked On Irish. This is your daily home for Notre Dame football. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, which is now the #1 sports podcast network, all thanks to your support. I'm your host, Tyler Wojciak. I graduated from Notre Dame in 2018. Now I'm a producer at Fox Sports, and I've been covering the Irish for the last 5 years. It is Friday, February 13th, so happy Friday to you. Even though it's Friday the 13th, it's still a happy Friday. And thank you for getting your day started right here by making this your first watch or listen of the day. Before we get rolling, please take a second to subscribe to the YouTube channel or wherever you get your podcasts. And this episode is brought to you by Mazda. We put the same drive into every detail. Wins define the moment, putting in the work, that defines you. Stay tuned for highlights in this week's Moving the Game Forward. There's more to a Mazda because there is more to you. All right, so normally this episode is reserved for the Friday mailbag, but as I've mentioned all week, I've been on a work trip all week long. The schedule has been insane and very unpredictable, and we just weren't able to do the show daily like we usually do. So I appreciate your patience. I promise you we're going to have a loaded mailbag next Friday. But today, we are finishing what we started earlier in the week because on Wednesday, I projected the offensive depth chart entering spring practice for Notre Dame, and now it is time for the defense. And this was honestly a lot more difficult to project because of just how deep this unit is across the board. They've got NFL talent on the defensive line. They have an elite group of linebackers, and they have quite literally the best secondary in the entire country. And I'm not talking about the starting five. I'm talking about first string, second string, and third string. So let's predict it. Let's start off with the defensive line. We're going to start out at the left defensive end, which was formerly known as the Viper position. Maybe Charlie Partridge is going to change the terms now that he is the new defensive line coach, but let's talk about this as like the traditional Viper role. No surprise with the starter. That's going to be Boubacar Traore. But then after that, I think there are some fair questions about the depth behind Traore because I think it's going to be Logan Thomas there coming in as his immediate backup. And then I think it's going to be the true freshman, Ebenezer Iwatade, who's going to start out with the third string unit. And then behind him, Dominique Kulak, who's going to be entering his sophomore season. But Boubacar has a chance to play himself into the second round of the NFL draft, maybe even the first round, if he's able to build on all the success that he had last season. He led the team in quarterback pressures with 31. He had 6.5 sacks, 10 total TFLs. He had a great season coming off that torn ACL that he suffered the year prior. But behind him, Notre Dame has to replace 578 snaps combined between Junior Tuihalamaka and Jordan Botelho, and those are the two guys who backed up Traore last season. It is rare to have two seniors as your backup defensive ends at one position, but that was the case for Notre Dame, and it was a great luxury to have, but now that's gone. And now Logan Thomas has to step up. He was listed at 275, or 207, not 275. 275 would be great. Logan Thomas was listed at 207 on the spring practice roster reveal. Look, maybe there's a chance that was wrong, but if we take it for its word, that's a concern because Logan Thomas's lack of size has held him back from playing more before. He's also suffered injuries that might have to do with his lack of size playing a position like defensive end. So he's got to put on weight. He's got to be stronger. But Notre Dame needs him to have a big year. And I like Logan Thomas. I still think he could be a good player. He just has to be a little bit more reliable. And he can't just be a guy who comes in on third down to get after the quarterback because Notre Dame already has a bunch of guys who can do that. They need a reliable backup at the defensive end. I think it's going to be Logan Thomas, but he's going to have to prove it. And if he doesn't, don't be surprised if Ebenezer Iwatade makes a name for himself as a true freshman. Iwatade reminds me a lot of Boubacar Traore as a true freshman. He's very raw, but he has freaky traits, and he has an innate ability to get after the quarterback. So Notre Dame might need Ebenezer Iwatade to develop quickly. He's a highly touted recruit, so it's very possible. And then Hulek didn't do that much his freshman year, but this could be an important spring for him if he were to make a move, because if he doesn't, he could get passed up by the younger guys like Iwatade. All right, now looking at the other side, right defensive end, formerly strong side end. I still expect Bryce Young to be the starter and then Keon Keeley to be his immediate backup. They'll rotate, I'm sure, but Bryce Young is going to be the starter. And then behind Keeley, you've got Ronnie Dunham, the 5-star recruit who's going to be on campus this spring. And then at 4, I think it's going to be Joe Reif. So Bryce Young trimmed down a little bit after bulking up a lot going into his sophomore season. I think that's good. I think he's going to play faster, more freely, all that stuff. And he's got all the tools in the world to be a first-round NFL draft pick. But now he has to put it together. And even though his season didn't live up to the expectations that I and many others had placed on him going into the year, he still had a good season. Like, he was second on the team with 29 quarterback pressures, but he only had 2 sacks, so that number has to improve. I think it will. I am not selling any of my Bryce Young stock. I think he's going to have a huge year in his junior season, but then behind him, we've got Keon Keeley, the transfer from Alabama. I think he was a great addition in the portal to replace Josh Burnham, who's now at Indiana. However, Keeley is going to have his best season to match what Burnham did for the Irish last year, especially the way Burnham was playing in the second half of the year. He finished third on the team with 6 TFLs on the year. He actually should have had another one, but that sack that he had against Boston College was wiped away because of a ridiculous penalty. So Josh Burnham was playing really well, and that was a tough loss. But Keon Keeley does have a higher ceiling than Burnham. He just has to put it together on a more consistent basis. Yes, he flashed at times at the end of the season for Alabama. Can he do that for an entire season? It remains to be seen. I think he will, now that he's in a more comfortable environment like the one he'll be in at Notre Dame, but we have to see it to believe it. And then behind Keeley, you got Rodney Dunham. He was the highest rated recruit in a loaded recruiting class, maybe one of the best Notre Dame has had in like 3 decades. I don't think he's going to start right away, but I absolutely expect Rodney Dunham to be a big contributor for the Irish this season. And then you've got Joseph Reif, who's a lot like Hulak, somewhat anonymous during his freshman season. He needs to make a move now, or else he's going to get surpassed by those younger guys. All right, now let's look at the defensive tackle spots. So we're going to look at defensive tackle, then nose tackle. The dynamic of this position has certainly changed a lot in the past couple months after what Notre Dame was able to do in the transfer portal, and also because they found out that Jason Onye was going to be granted another year of eligibility. So at this defensive tackle spot, and these guys could move around along the defensive line, but I think it's going to go Jason Onye as the starter, Tiona Gray, the transfer from Oregon, Cole Mullins, Christopher Burgess Jr., Sean Civillano, Gordy Solstead, and Tiki Hula. If it sounds like a lot of players, that's because it is. Notre Dame has a ton of scholarship defensive linemen on this team, in this class, whatever you want to call it. So getting Onye back is huge. He's a grown man, 6-year player who was playing very well down the stretch last season when he came in for Gabriel Rubio. And then behind him, you've got Tiona Gray, who is going to be an absolute force in the run game. He is 333 pounds, and he was really improving at Oregon. So when they come in short yardage situations, he is going to absorb many blockers, and I think it's going to just create lanes for those linebackers to come in and make some plays. But then there are 2 guys that I'm really interested in. Cole Mullins, Christopher Burgess, they're both poised to make a big jump. If they do, this position could really become a strength. The fact that they have guys like Francis Brew and Tiona Gray and also Jason Onye to like provide some cushion so that Notre Dame isn't putting all their eggs in one basket with Cole Mullins or Christopher Burgess, like, hey, you guys have to make a jump or else the team is screwed. So now they're in a much better place, and I think that with more opportunity, Mullins and Burgess are going to make a name for themselves. And then for guys like Sean Civillano Jr., like, this is a make-or-break season. If he does not start to crack the rotation now, it might not happen for him at Notre Dame. I'm not ruling him out. I'm just saying, like, time is running out, so he's got to make a move this offseason. All right, now at nose tackle, I think it's going to be Francis Brew, the transfer from Pittsburgh, and then Elijah Hughes, Armel Mukum, Davion Dixon, Gordy Solstead, and Elijah Golden. Francis Brew is a plug-and-play starter. There's just no doubt about it. He was a freshman All-American at Pittsburgh, then had a really good season for them last year, 7.5 tackles for loss, and he is very gifted, despite the fact that he's undersized. Like, he's just over 270 pounds, but he can squat 1,000,000, bench even more than that. He is a stud. He is going to be such a good addition to the interior of this defensive line. And then Elijah Hughes, also a transfer, just not in this most recent cycle, transferred over from USC last offseason. He became a really reliable player down the stretch. He got increased playing time, and he was not a starter, but he'd come in and just give you energy on the defensive line. He plays just with reckless abandon out there. Sometimes you got to like rein him in a little bit, but he's really good, a great player to have in that top 4. And then you've got Armel Mukum, who's coming back to Notre Dame after he entered the transfer portal. I'm very excited to hear Armel Mukum explain his decision to enter the transfer portal and then why he ultimately decided to come back to Notre Dame, because he took visits. He was looking at places like Virginia. I think Georgia Tech was another school that he was looking at, but he opted to come back to Notre Dame. But he wasn't the only one, right? Because they added Gray, they added Brew, and then they got Onye back. So maybe he didn't expect them to make that kind of moves. I don't know. But still, the fact that he came back is good for Notre Dame because they need depth at this position. He's older. Armel Mukam has always had all kinds of traits, but he also played less than 100 snaps last season. That's after Gabriel Rubio went down, and they were thin on the defensive line, and specifically a defensive tackle at some points late in the year. So it's another make-or-break offseason for Armel Mukam, but overall, when you look at the defensive tackle position here at either one of those spots, Notre Dame can rotate. They have guys who can come in, be impact players, bring in energy off the bench, all kinds of things that they didn't have or didn't think they were going to have a couple months ago before the transfer portal. Now they have it, and this defensive line is in great shape heading into spring practice. So Notre Dame might have 8 or 9 defensive backs who could start literally anywhere else in the country, but only 5 are going to be on the field for the vast majority of the time. So who will get those spots? Let's sort it out right after this. Today's episode is brought to you by Indeed. Hiring isn't just about finding someone willing to take the job. It's about finding the right person with the right background who can actually help your business move forward. And if you want candidates who match what you're looking for, Indeed Sponsored Jobs is the move. Because instead of hoping the right person stumbles across your post, Indeed helps you match with quality candidates by boosting your job listing to the people who fit your specific criteria, like skills, certifications, and location. If I were hiring, I wouldn't just want someone who can help. I'd want someone with real experience who can jump right in. That's what I like about Indeed. You can get specific and target exactly what you need. It saves time because you're spending less energy sorting through mismatches, and with sponsored jobs, your post gets seen by candidates who are actually a fit. And here's a stat that says it all. In the minute I've been talking to you, companies like yours made 27 hires on Indeed, according to Indeed data worldwide. So if you're hiring, spend less time searching and more time interviewing candidates who check all your boxes with Indeed Sponsored Jobs. Listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to help get your job the premium status it deserves at Indeed.com/podcast. That's Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring, do it the right way with Indeed. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. The Winter Games are officially here, and if you're anything like us, you are locking in for events you only get to see on the biggest stage every 4 years. And that's why following the Winter Games on FanDuel just makes sense. From medal counts to individual events to finding your angle on the sports you care about most, FanDuel gives you more ways to stay connected to the action. There are all kinds of events you can bet on, from the drama of curling matches that start slow and somehow get intense fast, to speed skating races decided by inches. And of course, you have the hockey games that feel different right from the opening face-off. Even niche events become must-watch when you're fully locked into the competition. FanDuel keeps the entire Olympic experience engaging from start to finish. The Winter Games are on, and there's no better way to follow them than with FanDuel. FanDuel, play your game. Welcome back to Locked On Irish. Today we are projecting Notre Dame's defensive depth chart ahead of spring practice. But before we get to the depth chart, I wanted to remind you that if you have not already, make sure you check out our new Everydayer Club. You'll get access to an ad-free audio feed for Locked On Irish. It is the same show, same schedule, just no ads, and it works on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or whatever podcast app you use. If you listen every day, it's a really easy upgrade. Just go to lockedonirish.supercast.com or tap the link in the show notes to learn more. All right, now let's look at the defensive backs. I'm going to start at nickel. We have talked about the nickel position a lot, but in spring, it's going to be a little bit different than what it's going to be like in the fall, and that is because DJ McKinney, the transfer from Colorado, is not going to be able to participate with Notre Dame for spring practice. I believe he has to finish out his graduation at Colorado. Then he will join Notre Dame in the summer, but that opens up a great opportunity for Dallas Golden, who is going to be entering his second year with the program. And last year, I thought he played admirably when he had to fill in for nickel when Devontae Smith was hurt. Dallas Golden spent the entire offseason training at field corner, and then Notre Dame was in, pretty much desperate need for a nickel. They moved Dallas Golden over, and sure, he got beat a few times, but he also made some really nice plays as well. So I think when the first team unit takes the field on defense, Dallas Golden is going to be the one that goes out there. Behind him, I think on the depth chart, it's going to be Nick Reddish, the incoming freshman, but we're going to see Christian Gray get some snaps at nickel. I've already expressed my concerns about Christian Gray playing at nickel, but Mike Mickens thought it was worth a shot. And even though he's now with the Ravens, I think Aaron Henry and this Notre Dame defensive staff are going to at least see what it would look like with Christian Gray at nickel. And if that doesn't work, they could also try Jaden Sanders, the transfer from Michigan too. Sanders is another guy like McKinney who played corner last season for the Wolverines, but he barely played at that nickel spot. So they're going to try it. And if that doesn't work, you know who else they could try? Joey O'Brien, true freshman, 5-star. He's going to be on campus this spring. I understand that the staff likes experienced guys at the position, But Kyle Hamilton made it work as a freshman. Kyle Hamilton played safety for the last 2 years at Notre Dame, but he started at nickel for Notre Dame as a true freshman. Joey O'Brien has already been compared to Kyle Hamilton, so maybe it makes sense there. But I think when you look at the depth chart, at least at the start, it's going to be Dallas Golden and Nick Reddish. But there are just so many different options that Notre Dame is going to try, and then they're going to figure out what works best. And then once DJ McKinney is part of the team for summer workouts and things like that, I'm sure he's going to get reps there as well. But they just have a wealth of talent across the board at defensive back. But as I alluded to in the first segment, there's only 5 spots, so they're going to mix and match a little bit more than they ever have. But you know where they're not going to mix and match. That's at boundary corner, because as long as Leonard Moore is healthy, he is going to be out there as the starting boundary corner. That's because he is the best cornerback in the entire country. Behind him, though, you have some question marks, right? Mark Zachary filled in for Moore last year when Moore went down with an ankle injury in that Texas A&M game, got a couple starts, got burned, but then actually got a lot better. Like, you could literally see Mark Zachary improve so much from game to game. Like, what he looked like against Purdue is not at all what he looked like later on in the season. And then I think in the third string, at least to start, it's going to be another 5-star freshman, Kerry Adams. Just think about the fact that Kerry Adams could probably have started for a lot of Notre Dame teams in the past. But when they take the field for spring practice, he's going to be the third string. He's not a third-string caliber player. And I know that Mike Mickens thought that Kerry Adams could fight for a starting spot from day one. And even though he's gone, he recognized his talent better than anyone at the position. So there is a real chance that Adams could beat out Zachary. He's not going to beat out Leonard Moore, but he's going to be fighting for some playing time from day one. Now, at field corner, another interesting position, because I think Christian Gray is going to be the day one starter for sure, but he's going to have to fight for it harder than he probably has had to fight the last 2 years. Behind him, I think it's going to be Jaden Sanders, the transfer from Michigan, and then Aiden Pouncey, another highly touted freshman, not quite a 5-star, but a high 4-star, and a lot of people think that he might actually be the most talented player in the class. I'm not there yet, but I think he's going to be a big impact guy for the Irish. And then behind Pouncey, Chaz Smith, who is another very talented cornerback recruit. He just doesn't have quite the same level of like recruiting fanfare as Adams and Pouncey, because they're just rated higher. But Chaz Smith is also a really good player. I've mentioned this before. I'm surprised that they have Aiden Pouncey at corner, only because I just think he's so versatile. Like, he could play wide receiver if they really wanted him to do that, but he could also play safety. And I just think that there's an easier path for him to get on the field sooner at safety, and Notre Dame doesn't have quite the same level of depth at the back end that they do at corner, but the coaching staff likes him at safety, and the fact that you could have Aiden Pouncey and Kerry Adams as third stringers is just crazy. But that just shows you the depth that this entire secondary has. All right, now let's talk about those safeties. Boundary safety, you know who the starter is going to be. That is going to be Adon Schuler. Now, his backup, that's interesting. I think it's going to be Ethan Long. The Brunswick, Connecticut native beat out Jadon Blair as a freshman, even though Blair was the more highly rated recruit. And that is exactly why Jadon Blair is now at Missouri. It's because Ethan Long beat him out, and we actually saw it happen, really, during that Syracuse game, because Ethan Long came in before Jadon Blair, played a lot, and then Ethan Long goes out there, gets a pick six, gets wiped off because of a penalty. So what does he do? He just gets another interception. I was really, really impressed by him. I did not expect him to be as good as he was as a freshman, and to beat out Blair like that when you consider the fact that Blair was like 6'6", had freakishly long arms, but Ethan Long just flat out beat him out on the football field. So he's going to have a chance to play a little bit more this year. Behind him, technically Brandon Logan, but Brandon Logan is going to be caught up playing baseball for the Notre Dame baseball team. So it's going to be pretty thin right there at safety. Now at field safety, Tay Johnson is going to be the obvious starter, but then you have Luke Talich right there behind him. Luke Talich is not going to beat out Johnson for a starting spot, but we are going to see Luke Talich a lot this season. We saw him make a ton of plays last year. He had the pick to close out the USC game, and he was just making plays, man. Like, for the limited action that he had, I feel like he reminds me of Jack Kaiser before Jack Kaiser was a starter like he was in 2024, where Kaiser was a guy who would rotate in right when they had Bertrand and Leofau, and whenever he was out on the field, he was making plays, but he just wasn't quite as good as the guys in front of him. And then once he had his time to be a full-time starter, he took off at an amazing season, helped lead Notre Dame to a national championship appearance. I see similarities with Luke Tallich's game because he's not going to beat out Tate Johnson. He's not going to beat out Don Schuler. But when he's on the field, he is out there making plays. He's deflecting passes. He's making plays in the run game. Like, he can do so many different things with his size and his speed, and now he has the experience as well to back it all up. He's going to be a very good player for the Irish this season. And then, I guess, in the third string, you're going to have Joey O'Brien. So you could have Pouncey, Adams, and Joey O'Brien in the third string unit to start spring practice. Is that how it's going to finish? Almost certainly not, because they're too good of players. Joey O'Brien is a freak, and I think they're going to try playing him all over this defense. They might just bring in new formations, new packages, all kinds of stuff to get him on the field because he is just that good. But I think when they take the field to start, O'Brien is going to be a third string. But like I said earlier, he could play nickel. They could try all kinds of different things with Joey O'Brien. But when you have a safety room at one spot, not even just both safety spots, the field safety has Tate Johnson, Luke Tallich, Joey O'Brien. That is insane, and that is a testament to what Mike Mickens did, recruiting talent, developing talent, and now that Aaron Henry is on board as the Notre Dame defensive backs coach, he just has a wealth of talent and experience to work with, and it's going to be a fun little puzzle for him to try to figure out because Notre Dame just has so many talented guys in their secondary, but only 5 are going to be on the field for the majority of the time. At linebacker, it's pretty much the same story. Notre Dame has 5 guys who could start, but there are really only 2 spots. So who's actually going to line up with the first team? It's coming up next. This episode is brought to you by Mazda's Moving the Game Forward, for those who believe there's more to a score than what's on the screen. When I think about what that really means, I think about Marcus Freeman at Notre Dame, 4 years in, and what stands out isn't just the wins, it's the way that he has built this program, the culture, the accountability, the way players talk about preparation and trust in one another. It's the work that happens long before kickoff, in meetings, in practice, and how standards are set every single day. That's what moves a program forward. Not just the final score, but everything that leads up to it. It reminds us of what it really takes to raise the bar. It's that extra work off the court or the field, dialing in on every detail, giving it that extra fire, that grit, and I never quit. We put that same passion into every model. Highlights make the reel. What it took to get there makes it count. There's more to a Mazda because there's more to you. All right, we are back here on Locked On Irish, projecting Notre Dame's defensive depth chart before the start of spring practice, and we saved linebacker for last because there are only 2 spots there, and it was honestly the easiest to fill out. At Mike linebacker, you know who the starter is going to be. It's going to be Drayk Bowen. Behind him, you're going to have Man Framo entering his sophomore season, and then I think it's going to be Kahanu Kia, and then the freshman Thomas Davis Jr. Obviously, once Kingston Biliamo-Asa recovers from his injury that he suffered against Syracuse last season, he's going to be right up there rotating with Bowen, either at Mike or he's going to be the starting will linebacker. He'll just continue being the jack-of-all-trades linebacker that he has been for the Irish the past 2 seasons. You know what you're getting with Drayk Bowen, a stud linebacker, team leader, all of that. Behind him, Man Framo, a little bit more of an unknown. He flashed in moments last year. He only played 144 snaps on the season, barely played at the start of the year, started to come in a lot more during the second half of the season to the point where he was actually taking snaps away from Jalen Sneed. There were a few games in the second half of the year where Framo played more than Sneed, and it wasn't like Sneed was playing poorly either. He had a great game against USC. But in just 144 snaps, Madden Framo had 3 tackles for loss. He's a really good player. I think he's going to take a huge leap going into his second season, and we're all going to be reminded why that was such a huge win for Notre Dame on the recruiting trail when they were able to get Madden Framo to commit to Notre Dame on signing day, even though everyone thought he was going to go to USC. I think we're going to see why that was such a huge win next season. And Kahanu Kia is a name that is, very underrated. Unless you're following this team literally every single day, you're watching the show, listening to the show, all of that, you're just, every player on the team. Like, who Kahanu Kia is, but most people don't. But I'm telling you, that is a damn good football player. He's just in a crowded room. He can hit and he can make tackles. We saw that in the spring game. I think it was 2 years ago, maybe, where he had like 20 tackles or something like that. His time will come, but right now he's just behind Framo and Bowen, 2 studs. And then Thomas Davis Jr., the freshman, I'm really excited about his future at Notre Dame. He just has to bulk up a little bit. He was one of the leaders in the recruiting class, so I'm just excited to see him on campus in Notre Dame uniform. It felt like he was committed to Notre Dame forever, but now he gets to go out and take the field in the blue and gold. All right, at will linebacker, I think Jaden Osbury is going to be the starter, and then Jalen Sneed right behind him, similar to Mike Linebacker. You've got that one guy, but then I think Sneed is a guy who can come in. It's a little bit different in the sense that Sneed is going to be a fifth year, Framo is going to be a sophomore, but I just think Notre Dame can do all kinds of fun things with Osbury and Sneed there. And then behind Sneed, it's going to be Ko'o Kia, Kahanu's brother, and then Teddy Rizak and Jacoby Clapper. I expect Osbury and Sneed to rotate heavily here, but Osbury actually finished a second among linebackers in snaps last season. He was only behind Drayk Bowen, although we should mention that Osbury barely beat out KVA, and KVA did miss the entire Stanford game. So maybe, if KVA plays that game, he probably finishes second in snaps among the linebackers. But I think that shows you how highly Max Bulla and Chris Ash think of Jaden Osbury, because he doesn't have like those flashy plays off the edge like KVA, or he doesn't have like the huge hits like Drayk Bowen. But Jaden Osbury has a very high football IQ. He can do a bunch of different things for this defense. He's the best cover linebacker by far, in my opinion, and he got worn out at the end of 2024, and he had that like robot brace on his arm. So he started to tail off, but I think he had a nice bounce back season. 2025 proved why he's such a good player. The coaching staff loves him. And I think now that he is even more experienced, and you pair that with Bowen's experience, like they can just get a lot more creative with what they want to do. And Sneed is a fifth-year guy too. He can come off the edge and do some exotic blitzes. So they have 4 guys that they can count on in spring practice. They're going to have 5 once KVA is healthy. And then behind them, it's a lot of young guys who need time, but they will be good players down the road. Like someone like Kahanu Kia, I think is good. Teddy Rizak was always going to be developmental. Jacoby Clapper, I loved his toughness and what he showed at St. Xavier. Shout out the Bombers in Cincinnati. But there are just all kinds of really good players in this linebacking corps here, but really, you're only going to see 2 guys in the field at once unless it's like a third and long situation and Notre Dame is bringing in Sneed to rush the passer. They just have all kinds of different guys who can play, who can be really good, who can be really effective for this defense. And watching Chris Ash figure out the best way to utilize all these players with the new coaching staff and Charlie Partridge and Brian Jean-Marie and Aaron Henry is going to be interesting to watch. It's not going to be perfect from day one, but it's not meant to be. Spring practice is all about, figuring out what works, trying things, seeing what doesn't work, and then ultimately building up and ramping up in the summer to training camp, and then you're full go by the start of the season. But there you go. That is how I predict Notre Dame's defensive depth chart. We'll look at the start of spring practice on defense. Odds are we're going to see some moving and shaking, and we're going to be covering it every day here on Locked On Irish. All right, that is going to do it for today's show. Thank you for making this your first watch or listen of the day, and for tuning in all week long. Again, I appreciate everyone's patience this week. The schedule has been inconsistent with me being on the road. I'm actually going to be traveling again tomorrow, but we are going to be back to normal next week. So if you're watching on YouTube, make sure you subscribe to the channel, like the video below, or if you're listening on the podcast side, please follow the show, rate it 5 stars, and leave a review because it really helps us grow. And if you never miss an episode, the Everydayer Club is built for you. Get Locked On Irish ad-free, plus members-only Discord access and more. Head to lockedonirish.supercast.com to join the club. Have a great weekend, everybody. I'll see you next week.
You are Locked On Irish, your daily podcast on the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.